Hey everybody, welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. We have a really fun show in store. We're going to be talking all about shamanic astrology. And about a month ago, I got a reading from Daniel Giamaro Mario, and it was one of the best readings that I've ever received. And so I really wanted to have Daniel on and to tell us a little bit about his work called Shamanic Astrology. So welcome, Daniel.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, CJ. Good to see you in person here.
Yeah, I know because we
I
were
mean,
talking when you were here.
video,
You were, I
yes.
think, at some place in a different country when I was talking to you last time, right? When you
I
did my
was
reading.
uh, I was in the Philippines.
Oh wow. Okay.
I spend most of my time there.
Oh, nice for you. Okay, so I want to talk about astrology. Like, how did it even start? What were people trying to figure out through learning about the planets and the stars?
What we do in our school, and my own interest, goes way back before the origin of horoscopes. So most people, when they think of astrology, they only think of the personal chart. Either a square or a round chart
Hmm.
that is then the a snapshot of that individual in time and place. However, the tradition goes way further back, back before individual horoscopes, when entire clans, tribes, cultures organized their lives with the way the seasons were, the way different star patterns were happening, orientations toward the different directions, using an awareness of Venus and Mars cycles in order to create mythic ceremonial ways of living one's life. It was actually part of an ancient project that seems to have spanned the globe, which was to create a culture in harmony with the heavens.
Oh,
We could call it bringing heaven to earth.
yeah,
And we
interesting.
found it. We found it in Egypt. We find it even in for 22,000 years ago in Indonesia. We find it in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. We find it out in places more people are familiar with, like in Ireland, Scotland, Stonehenge, UK, those kinds of places, which were part of the same project
Hmm.
of having an entire culture in harmony with the different seasons and
Oh,
cycles that are connecting to the sky. But then around 500, 600 BC, there was a shift in human consciousness that could be seen through people like the Buddha, through individuals like Pythagoras, Zoroaster, Lao Tzu, people all around the planet around 500, 600 BC that brought in a new understanding that would have to do with individual consciousness and individual
oh,
enlightenment. And
uh-huh,
around that same time came individual horoscopes. So then the
oh,
emphasis had to do with the individual's evolutionary journey. And
oh,
we could say that was an evolutionary advance. However, recently, and much of our own work in our school is to reconnect the individual charts with the whole global process.
okay.
My own mentor, named Dane Rajar, called this the planetarization of consciousness. So
Right.
it's a way of reintegrating the individual journey with all of global humanity.
Okay. So
So,
the ancient cultures, like the Egyptian culture and some of the indigenous cultures, we may say, were
mhm,
trying to live in harmony with the land,
yes.
probably because they either had like massive storms and they couldn't figure out how they could live on the land. I mean, or they were trying to pray to the gods to have rain, good
Well,
fortune. Is that what they're
there
doing?
were certainly practical reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, some people might look at it purely through our own more practical consciousness. To figure out when to plant, in order to do ceremony, in order to make sure the seasons are in balance, things like that. But there is more to it than that. I think it was part of a global spiritual tradition where
Hmm.
individuals found themselves not dominant over nature, not a patriarchal or monotheistic approach, but something that's more, to use a word that has been uh, judged against, I guess you could say, because it was considered to be archaic, and that's more animistic. The fact that everything is alive, that
Hmm.
we have a connection to land and sky, and we are
Hmm.
informed by that connection when we live in harmony with the seasons. So it's part of an ancient tradition that lasted on this planet a lot longer time than what modern technological consciousness brought to us.
Okay, so there's this idea, and you mentioned that it was in the whole idea of as above, as below.
As above, so below. Yes.
As above, so below. So that whole idea is what? That whatever is happening in the heavens
Yes.
is also happening with us. And my husband was just telling me about Rudolf Steiner, who
Yes.
said, like, we are Earth. And so when we are actually going into the lower world or the underworld, whatever you want to talk
Yes.
about it, it's going into our unconscious or subconscious. Whereas when we're going up to the heavens, we're actually connecting to our conscious or higher consciousness. And so we have that kind of similar mirror of higher consciousness, lower consciousness, upper world, lower world. And that's in tune with, as I understand, shamanism has that same kind
Indeed,
of model.
and actually, there's a development that came out of Rudolf Steiner's work called astrosophy,
Huh,
which
okay.
was he himself was not the creator. Well, it was sourced from him, but he was not an astrosophist. But some of his students developed this way of working with the sky. Most people today are familiar with the practical applications of it through biodynamic farming and
Okay.
different ways that the Steiner schools still work with the sky. But our school was partially influenced by that approach.
Okay.
The only thing that might be a little bit different is that we have to, and we want to make this distinction. We don't want to give the impression that the above is better than the below.
Right.
That the underworld is part of our experience as much as the upper world is.
Right.
And so that it's not like, it's kind of like that thing that happens in certain meditational practices where they'll talk about the higher chakras
Right.
and the lower chakras, and then we have the connotation they're somehow less evolved.
Yes.
When in shamanic astrology, the understanding we have, which is one of the reasons we call it shamanic astrology, is that equally important to the journey of evolution is the journey of involution, bringing spirit into matter, bringing spirit consciousness into earth, into our bodies,
Right. It's this
to our
more
emotions.
harmonizing the
Right.
it's harmonizing below and above versus this is good, this is bad. Right?
Correct.
Yeah, it's kind
Or
of
the tendency, even 90% of mainstream or more of the earlier Western astrological traditions were always emphasizing, not all of them, but the majority, of going up and out, as if somehow our experience here in the body as a human being was somehow the lower realm and we needed to get out of here.
right.
I take the approach. It's more the first time I heard this expression is one of my other earlier teachers was Ram Dass, and he wrote a book called "The Only Dance There Is," which is basically what we're experiencing here is all there is.
Right.
So we bring in consciousness to that experience. We're not trying to leave and go anywhere else.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to go back to the as above, so below. So if there is no judgment one way or another,
Yes.
and if there is a connection, like one equals the other, then the reverse would be true too. So
Yes. Yes.
as below, as above. So does that mean that our consciousness affects the upper?
Yeah, I actually loved that question very much. It's one of the ingredients of how we perceive this, which is that we inform the mystery as much as the mystery informs us.
Yeah.
In certain other, not with astrology per se, but certain other spiritual organizations now refer to this as the evolution of God, which is that rather than it being some overlord that we are like.
Wow, I just got chills all over. Wow, that's huge. Yeah.
So that our own growing awareness and our own waking up to the responsibility that we are part of the process and not victims of it.
Right.
we then either blame some outer force, or that we end up feeling guilty, or the various monotheistic challenges that come from that approach. We don't look at it that way. We look
Yeah.
at it in the sense that our growing consciousness is needed by great mystery as much as our own connection with great mystery teaches us, connection, openness, humility, humbleness, because we can't really ever know it all.
Okay, and then there's another idea of as within as. I'm totally butchering
Yes.
this. Can you help me?
Well, yeah, well, there's different translations. I mean, this comes from the Emerald Tablets, the original work that was found that was called the Emerald Tablets, written by allegedly Hermes Thoth Trismegistus. And it's this ancient text that goes into this in great detail, but it starts out with one translation of it is, as above, so below, as within, so without.
Okay, what's that mean? I have a harder time with that one.
Yeah, well, it's just really the words to what we're talking about right now. That so what's within is connected to the great above, and what is above is connected to what's within us. So that in shamanic astrology, for example, our view is that if we know the patternings of the sky, if we know the patternings of the planets, and that we connect with it in a particular way, experientially, and are open to it, that it turns out to be the same as the inner patterns of our own psyche. They are the same thing. And the modern understanding of this, CJ, would be similar to the view in certain science approaches of holograms.
Oh,
where
wow.
you have a hologram where the smallest little piece and the largest possible expression of it are the same thing.
Okay, so I'm just going to track this a little bit more because I'm taking, my show is all about spirituality, and the whole idea
Yes.
is that, we come in as souls with the
Yes.
history and trajectory of our souls, and we travel a path, a life path with a life lesson, and then we go and we kind of evolve, like you're talking about, over and over again. So this is what happens on this level. So is the same, like, could you look at a planet or a sun or the moon? Is it doing something similar, or do you view that from a shamanic perspective as souls? And I think we were just talking about how we're evolving and they're evolving, but do you think it's a similar kind of thing where they're souls with intentions
Yes.
and purpose?
Well, the animistic view, or this as above, so below view, this view that is a part of core shamanism, would be the understanding that everything is alive, that
Right.
there's consciousness in everything. So that while I have never really followed through completely on what you're talking about, are the planets themselves evolving, then yeah, I would suggest that that's happening simultaneously. That
They're
that
souls,
there's yeah,
right? They have
that there's
souls, right?
a greater whatever we mean by that. I mean, we're talking about consciousness. If we're looking at the one reality, we're looking at the ways in which I like to use the expression "great mystery."
Right.
An alternative expression is the one reality, of which everything is in, and it has different essences. That the one reality also has a pattern. In fact, in the Emerald Tablets, pattern has a capital P. So that we could say that astrology is one of the ways in which we get as close as we can get to the pattern with the capital P, which is an expression of the one reality.
Okay, so let's actually take the sun, because
Yeah.
in the Egyptian stories and in the past, they really revered Ra, the sun. Okay,
It is, yes. Actually, an Egyptian approach, actually, it didn't begin, from what we know about the Egyptian tradition, it started primarily with stellar and lunar phenomena. They were much more into the stars, and then it became the moon. It wasn't until around the time of Akhenaten that the whole emphasis shifted to a more solar approach.
Okay, so let's actually start with the moon. Like, let's follow their their
Yes.
evolution. So it started with the moon and the
And the star
stars.
patterns, yes.
And so if you were to look at the moon, and you're saying the moon is a soul with an intention, I'm actually taking your work with a life intention, a purpose. What would that be? Like, what in those understanding of those traditions, what would the moon's intention be?
Well, I'm not suggesting that the Egyptian astrological system, from what we know about it, was identical to the way that I'm describing
Oh,
it.
no, no. I'm just wondering, though, if you
Yeah.
were to think about the moon, do you think it has an intention?
Um, the way that we work, I'm not sure. I don't know about
Yeah,
that.
I'm just curious.
But to me, the way we use the moon as the symbol of who we were before our incarnation. So the closest word to that is used by mainstream astrology is our instinctual self. But I will look at it in a more broad sense. It's our attitudes, our habits, our addictions, our expectations. And we're very clear that it's not female.
Right.
In fact, we were talking Hermes Thoth Trismegistus, who was the writer of the Emerald Tablets. He actually, in the Egyptian mythology, was a moon god. So the further back you go, you will notice that there are gods and goddesses attributed to both the sun and the moon. So it's only in the last couple of thousand years, particularly through patriarchy, Romance languages, and monotheism and those things, that the whole sun sign astrology came about, which is setting up something that is like one god above all others.
Right, a monotheistic kind of model.
Yes, and also patriarchal.
Right.
Particularly if the sun is perceived of as masculine.
I get it. Okay.
But our view here is more shamanic in the sense that we don't devalue the sun, but rather the sun is the only thing in nature that we cannot look at for very long without turning away. So I look at the sun as being the most extreme expressed manifestation of great mystery itself. So we do not limit it by attempting to impose any particular archetype on the sun.
Right.
Because, is it the self? Is it the soul? Is it the ego? There's so many different types of astrology that will try to say the sun is the central figure that is more important than anything else on the chart. But what a lot of people don't realize is that sun sign astrology is really recent. It only started in the 1800s. That in most of the other astrological traditions, they would actually place more emphasis on other ingredients, particularly the moon, the moon, but also, even more importantly, the ascendant, or the rising sign. As a matter of fact, the original word horoscope meant ascendant. It did not mean the whole chart. So that to actually know what was coming up over the eastern horizon, which changes by degree.
Which is the ascending sign.
Yeah, either the rising sign or the ascendant, equivalent terms, is that changes degree every 4 minutes. So to get a real sense of the individual, then that's what you tune into, which is why in shamanic astrology, we're one of the schools, it's not the same as in many other forms of astrology, is that the rising sign is actually life purpose. The directional flow of the soul is moving there. It's the number one symbol on the horoscope for why we incarnated.
Oh, interesting. So that's very different. And I'm just a novice to astrology, so please apologize. I apologize for any mistakes. But I got a natal map because I was trying to understand and wrap my head around this work. And so my natal map had a big circle that was divided into 12 quadrants, of which the center was my birth time. These things are called natal charts. And there was a big arrow that was pointing towards Aquarius, which was my sun sign. And then there was an ascendant sign and a descendant sign that was
the opposite of the ascendant is called the descendant.
Yeah, so there's an ascendant and descendant. Right. And so what I'm hearing you say is in 500 to 600 BC, that's when we started focusing on the sun and patriarchal model.
No. That's when the individual horoscope became important at that point, and it was through the knowledge of the ascendant. because it was the ascendant that personalized the horoscope. Otherwise, if you're just talking about the sun sign,
Right.
and the more modern understanding of the sun sign is putting everybody into 12 boxes based upon what month you're born in.
Right. Right. Which is not a fine enough refinement as
Right.
looking at the ascendant sign, which is what it's
Changes every 4 minutes.
yeah, that changes every 4 minutes. So that is at that moment of your birth, where was the sun rising on the eastern horizon?
Exactly.
Okay. And so that piece of information is actually related to in your work. It's about the life purpose. So it's not your work, it's your work which is based on some of these older traditional understandings of astrology.
Yeah, and also I've been at this now for about 45 years.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah. And I had the great fortune of my first teacher, not the well-known astrologer Dane Rajar, who was a mentor, but the person who first taught me astrology, a woman that I knew in college. For some reason, and I've never really figured this out, she taught me this way, which was to use the moon as who we used to be, and the rising sign being the directional flow of the soul is toward that. And to not emphasize the sun sign material, and it's never failed me. I mean, that has been in the way I've looked at charts for 45 years, and it just continually impresses me, blows my mind really about how well it works. But only if you are doing a kind of astrology that is different than purely mundane astrology.
Right. You
In
mean
other
the
words,
traditional things that you see in the newspaper, like Aquarius, you're born on this date, this is what this day is going to be. Like that's a mundane astrology.
or also something that's more deterministic, an approach that's trying to predict things as if everything is like linear. Actually, what I'm referring to is an approach that looks at our life as being more connected to intent. So that a birth chart will show the intent of the soul. A particular cycle that we're in will have an intention. And there's a way of navigating with that intention.
Right, whether
Your
you follow
Venus-
that intention or not is up to you. It's not deterministic. Like my life purpose is I'm an Aquarius, so it's like to be an innovator and to help people, whatever. That would be like when I read the Western mundane
Right.
astrology, it's kind of your purpose in life is to like help the world and do it in a kind of quirky way. That's kind of the energy.
Different, yeah, right. Avant-garde, progressive, individualistic, big view, eagle eye.
Yeah, it has that kind of energy.
But our view there would be, of course, is that how could you possibly say that everybody born within a 30-day time period
Right.
are all that way? So you cannot. I mean, certainly anyone who's actually looked at this for very long realizes that very few people are really like their sun sign.
Right.
So that's because it's putting everybody in a box for 30 days.
Right.
But if you're looking at things that are changing every 4 minutes,
Right.
or even the moon position, which what we were talking about earlier,
Right.
it changes every 2.5 days, way quicker.
I get it
sun.
now.
So these
Okay.
factors are way more individualistic.
Right. So if you think about it this way, every moment, soul is born, that soul actually has, characteristics, traits, past lives, which you would attribute to their moon sign, right? So mine is Shakti or Scorpio.
Scorpio moon.
Scorpio moon in a Scorpio job within a Scorpio tribe, let's say, is what you said. So that gives me a very strong flavor of like what I came into this world about. So
Right.
that's more information than, let's say, I'm an Aquarius and I'm going to be like innovative, whatever, because every single person comes in at that moment with a kind of prepackaged configuration of what they're going to be like, right? So that's why you focus on the moon. Is that why you
We
focus
start
on
with the moon. Always start with the moon.
Okay.
So that, as I was sharing with you when we did your session, talking about your lineage first gives us a framework from which we can understand what current life intent is about. Because there will be attitudes and habits and addictions which may or may not have been supported when you were young. We
Right.
talked about how the Scorpio lineage, particularly for women, has been one of the places on the wheel of life that had been heavily judged against.
Right, right. And so whether whether the seeds have been planted for me to be a particular way. Whether I grew that way kind of depends on my conditioning, life
Yes.
circumstances, what's happening
Yes.
in the environment. But the seeds were planted
Right.
for me to be in a particular place, and that's where you start as a foundation. And then the
Hmm.
thing that I didn't understand when we did this, I was trying to read in your book, is
Hmm.
there's 144 possibilities, because within
Hmm.
the Scorpio school, or within
Right.
my moon sign, there are like 12 different
Yes.
jobs. Tell me what that is and how you came up with that word.
Well, after this is definitely one of the innovations that I came up with myself, which is that if you know the moon, that narrows it down to 1 out of 12. And from a shamanic perspective, we call it the 12 tribes.
Hmm.
1 of 12 tribes. Or if those who don't like that expression, we call it the 12 schools. So you graduated from the University of Scorpio.
Right.
But that's like every 2.5 days, there's the same tribe.
Ah, okay.
Every 2 hours in the day, the nodes of the moon, which is another feature on the chart, will go into a different house.
Ah, I see. Okay, got it.
And so the
Wow.
location of the nodes in the houses are giving us this further differentiation. So that if you had the Scorpio, you had the South Node in the 8th house. So what that meant was the Scorpio job in the Scorpio tribe, or out of 144 possibilities, 12
Ah,
houses, 12 moon positions, your lineage was maximum Scorpio.
right.
Now, not every Scorpio moon is going to have, only 1 out of 12 is going to have the South Node in the 8th house, making it the Scorpio job in the Scorpio tribe.
Ah, okay, got it. So then you take a person's moon sign, and then
Mhm.
you actually look at where their nodes are in relationship
Yes.
to the houses, so you get even further
Correct.
refinement about who this person is coming in this world to be, in the shamanic astrology model.
Yes.
And then, so that's kind of the kind of foundational
From the past,
pieces.
that's
Yeah,
the
from the
foundational.
past. And
But
whether I
yes.
grow that way
Mhm.
or not, the seeds were planted, irrespective of whether I grow that way or not, which is, like you said, it's intentional versus directional. If I were to look at like a Western astrology right now, it's like she's going to be this. This is more like your seeds are planted, whether you end up that way or not. Is
Well,
totally up to you.
to be completely precise about
Yeah.
this, the lineage part of it, the moon and its variations, is the only part of the chart that describes who you were when you came in.
Ah, okay, got it.
The
Okay.
rest of it, like Venus and Mars and the rising sign and the house placements and all the rest of that, those are the intentions in the current life. It's like a set of instructions. If a person is a little confused about the word intention, we could say, oh, the chart has a set of instructions, which we can either choose to go along with or to be resistant of. So our life purpose is not always the path of least resistance. When this question comes up, I often refer to one of the great quotes that anyone has ever said. It was by Jung, and Jung is one of the greater inspirers of the shamanic astrology system. He once said, when he was asked, what is free will? What is free will? All right. He says, free will means to gladly do what you must do. Which means you have a set of instructions, and you can choose to cooperate with those set of instructions or not.
Okay,
and human
so
beings have the opportunity to not be their true self, as it were.
okay.
We can choose to go against the
Right.
flow. Mhm.
Okay, so my tribe, so to speak, is Scorpio, which has a certain set of directions, and within that, I'm the Scorpio house of, you said, 8th house in the Scorpio. So that gives me my intention, which is to be a
No,
Scorpio.
no. That's describing what your mastery was from the past.
Okay, got it. Okay, got it. Okay,
But
got
your
it.
Venus position in combination with the rising sign is where we get the really clear instructions of what to do in the current life.
Ah, okay. So I was a Capricorn at Capricorn rising in the sun sign of Aquarius. So in your model, the Capricorn is kind of, that's my intention, that's my life
Yeah, but
intention.
the Venus position, more than the sun sign, is what part to play.
Ah,
It's
okay.
like the role. What goddess? I don't
Right.
remember off the top of my
Is
head.
Shakti.
What
Shakti.
is your Venus position?
My Venus position is Capricorn. And so you said that map to the goddess Shakti in some
No,
models, or
no, that's Scorpio.
oh, I'm sorry.
Shakti is Scorpio.
Oh, okay, I'm the householder. I can't. It's Capricorn.
And what was your rising sign?
Um, I can't remember. I'm sorry. I wish I had these
Yeah,
memorized.
yeah,
Just
yeah. Because you're
yeah,
asking me very specific
yeah. No,
questions
but
about your
the
own chart. The Venus position, even if we did not know, and like a person does not know their birth time, for
yeah,
example, I could not speculate on what their rising sign
yeah.
was.
I think it's
'Cause that
Capricorn.
changes every 2 hours.
Yeah, I can't
But the
remember.
Venus position stays the same for a much longer period of time. So the Venus position would be what version of the goddess that you came into the current life to investigate.
Okay, God, I think it's
Capricorn.
Capricorn. Yeah, I think it's Capricorn. And so,
And
yeah,
that's the wisdom woman. That's the elder. That's the
yes,
woman
that's what you
who's
said.
here on the planet to make a difference in the world and to be looked up to for what you know, your
Yes.
ability to make a change in the world. Our new evolving model on the Venus and Capricorn position is something that's similar to being on the circle of grandmothers, the council of elders.
Right.
It stems from an ancient tradition of matriarchal times of where the women, as elders, were the ones that would hire and fire the chiefs.
Right. And so that's my intention to be an
Yes,
elder. I could actually
yes.
choose, and I came in with a set of histories and past
Hmm.
predispositions with seeds planted for me to be a certain way. Now, going back to your statement from Jung, I have now the choice to
Hmm.
follow this blueprint. I could
Right.
say I'm not doing any of that. I'm just going to sit on my butt and eat potato chips all day. Forget
Right.
about any of that, right? That's my free will
Hmm.
to exercise whether I follow my, how I was
Right.
maybe planted, the seeds that were planted, and my
Right.
intention. That's my choice. So that's the difference that you're seeing. Is what you said? Is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
difference between?
When I do my counseling work, or when people take our courses in the school, we're clearly trying to assist the individual in achieving what their current life intent is.
Yes.
But
Okay.
but we can't be attached to whether they actually do it or not.
Right.
We give the clues, we can offer suggestions.
Yes.
Maybe if you go this direction, your life is going to be more fulfilling. Even it might not be the easiest thing. There's plenty of people who will choose the path of least resistance.
Right.
Um, so if you have Venus in Capricorn, your objective would be to be in a position of respect.
Hmm.
People take you seriously, and that you are engaged in activities that make a difference in the world. The way the Native Americans would describe it is saying, well, does it grow corn? Does
Right.
it bring practical results to the people in a sustainable way over many generations?
Right. And that is my intention. I mean, and it was wild to actually hear your report because it is so much what I feel in my heart. And the interesting thing about the sun sign, which is so different in mundane astrology, is that you looked at that as that's the fuel.
Yes.
I'm an Aquarius sun, so that's like you said, like the out of box thinking of an Aquarius.
Right.
That's kind of the thing that's
You,
the
yes,
way.
it's
in
still
which
Capricorn, but
Right.
but you would be in with, because Capricorn, plain old Capricorn, is generally quite traditional conservative.
Right.
But if Capricorn Venus shows up in the month of Aquarius, then the objective of the way that Capricorn goddess operates is to be innovative, to think outside of the box,
Right.
to bring thoughts into the zone of Capricorn that would not normally be there.
Right. Okay, so this is to just show the great contrast between shamanic astrology versus, normal mundane astrology, which looks as the sun sign as kind of the marker of everything, a predeterministic point.
Yeah, and it's also more deterministic.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and so this whole view, I mean, back to your questioning of me about as above, so below.
Yeah.
And another thing I could easily would be really good for me to point out here is that this type of astrology, not all astrologers would agree with this, but this type of astrology does not look at it from a scientific model. It's not cause and effect. It's not linear. As above, so below is part of an ancient magical
Evolving.
worldview. It's more
Yeah.
about correspondences and synchronicities and the interweaving of patterns. It's not cause and effect, and which is why to me, it's not that useful to try to find some kind of scientific mechanism to describe why astrology works.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
there's
This is
many
more about
spend
being
their time
harmonistic.
doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And another reason for that is because you cannot really quantify intent.
Mm-hmm.
So so I use this example sometimes. If I'm giving a talk, and everybody in the circle are, say, Venus and Scorpio,
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to all be the same, but they will all have the same intent.
Ah, right. Perfect. Yes.
And how easily or more difficult it would be for them to go there to experience that would be based upon a lot of factors. It would be
Right.
based upon their lineage. It would be based upon what the culture happens to think about different archetypes. There's been huge judgment against Scorpio.
Yeah, I know.
And actually, there's been the consignment into a certain limited box for
Right.
Capricorn.
Mm-hmm.
Conservative, traditional. I mean, we have people, I've had men and women who have either Venus in Capricorn or Mars in Capricorn. I don't want to be this.
Right.
This is boring. I don't want to have this boring archetype. But they've been brainwashed into thinking that Capricorn looks a particular way. Since your show and your work with individuals is more within the a spiritual paradigm, yes. So I'd like to indicate here that in a new book that I'm writing, the very beginning chapter starts with the paraphrase that comes from the Bhagavad Gita. And it's the statement which is that it is far better to walk your dharma imperfectly than it is to walk the dharma of another person even perfectly. If you try to be someone else's dharma, and even if you do it perfectly, that path is fraught with spiritual danger. So basically, you can only be the one you have. And if we eliminate, as we do in shamanic astrology, the judgments, good, bad, high, low, right, wrong, people will say, geez, I have Venus in Virgo. That's not a good one, is it? We're trying to eliminate those kinds of thoughts from this, because there's been like a lot of damage done to people by cultural judgments, often supported by astrologers, as far as these simplistic meanings of sun signs.
Okay, so I want to go back to the moon signs and the goddesses that you map this stuff to. How did you attribute which goddesses, or were you just like, okay, if I actually think about the description, the mythical story, the mythology and the story is Kali or Pele for in particular in my one. How did you come up with those goddesses? Is it something that you came up with based on understanding the combination of the houses and the tribes? How did you come up with that?
Well, it was a combination of things. One is having done lots of reading and research on different mythic traditions around the world, including visiting many places around the world to check into how they viewed things. And then I discovered in different systems, sometimes Greek mythology, sometimes Celtic mythology, that there will be stories that exactly fit what I was seeing in human beings today.
I see. So you could say, that story about, like, when I hear about Pele or Kali or that's like, that is Scorpio. Yeah. So that's how you came up with that. Fascinating.
And there'll be like I have this conversation with my wife all the time, who's from the Philippines. Now, they do not have the same background on these different mythic systems. Now, that's a culture that's primarily just ensconced in Catholicism.
I see.
So therefore, describing these archetypes by Greek goddesses or
Right.
Hawaiian goddesses or Celtic gods and goddesses is not really that meaningful.
Right.
So there have to be other ways to
You're
explain
like
these things.
apostles and angels or whatever those things may be in kind of the
Right.
Catholicism.
Maybe,
those things.
yeah,
I don't
and
know.
different parts of the world will respond to different ways of describing it. But fortunately, in the United States and in Europe, there is actually a lot of familiarity to these images.
Right.
We've been introduced to them, and if that like improves our capacity to connect into these archetypal energies, then it's a helpful way of doing it. And it's, I guess over 45 years, there's been a refinement. I mean, 30 years ago, I didn't have precisely the same understanding, but it's based upon working with people over a long period of time.
Right.
If I look back on the 45 years, I probably sat with 20,000 people to go over their charts. And so I'm trying to see how people actually are and then tell the stories that correspond to it.
I see. Okay, got it. Interesting. So it's a kind of, again, it's a kind of an iterative process. You're telling, and then you're seeing the response, and you're kind
Right.
of refining. Okay, the last part of the reading, we had done a shamanic astrological reading in which you told me my moon sign, my rising sign, my sun sign, and then you talked about, and then relationships.
Yeah.
And then you talked about, well, I don't know, what should you do? We have about 5 minutes left. I want to talk about, okay, let's do the next part, the relationship. So we talked about Venus, and then there's a Mars. And so, and
Yes.
actually, the reason I heard about you was from Christiane Northrup, who was
Right.
talking about, in her particular case, she was saying, "Hey, I was finding myself always attracted, pulled towards a certain type of man." And it
Right.
wasn't until talking to Daniel that I realized that I was trying to find the male counterpart so that I could make myself whole. And it
Yes.
wasn't in talking to Daniel that I realized I had the freedom to just own those pieces myself and not having
Right.
to go after that guy who fit that prototype. And I think
Right.
it may have been a Leo. I think. I don't know what hers was, but mine is a Leo. Let's just use me instead of giving her personal information. But mine is actually a Leo.
Mars and Leo.
Yeah. So tell us how you came up with that work with
Yeah.
the female
Well,
male part.
yes, we call this the inner sacred marriage process. And we start off by looking at a woman's Mars position or a man's Venus position. And it seems that in the last 100 years, I can't say it was this way 2,000 years ago, most of us in current culture are trained to look outside of ourselves. If we could just find the right person.
I need to
and-
find my soulmate,
Wait.
right? Yeah.
like that, right? Or my parents' generation, meet
Right.
my other half,
Right,
that
yes.
kind of thing.
Yes.
I do not wish to be too critical of this because we do learn a lot through
Yeah.
personal relationship. However, what I'm more interested in helping people do is to not be in the shade of that external projection. Because some people are more successful than others in finding that outer partner that they think they're
Oh,
supposed
right.
to
Okay,
be
got
with.
it. Okay, got it. Yes.
And sometimes you will be with the person that you've always wanted to be with, and that can actually stand in the way of doing the inner sacred marriage process.
Yeah, for me, if I
Well,
was a Leo, I would be like a shrunken. The first guy I dated was like a Leo kind of person, and it
Right.
made me miserable. I just wanted
Sure,
to
and
strangle him.
so the average Leo type is going to be quite narcissistic, quite full of themselves. They are the great man. It's like the
Right.
imagery of the golden boy,
Yeah.
the superstar. There's obviously positive versions of that,
Right.
but whether you're with a negative or positive version of it, if you have Mars in Leo, the set of instructions there are that it's fine if you want to be with that type, but it's really important that you become that yourself.
Right.
That you are the Leo expression of the goddess, which is what we call Amazon Queen,
Right.
meaning a solar feminine, a
Yeah.
woman of who's the vision carrier,
Right.
who's the star of her own show, that is
Right.
inspiring others to be everything they can be.
Yes.
That's the magic of Leo.
Right. And actually, in my particular case, had I actually tried to pursue that Leo person, I know myself that I would be miserable with that particular person. And I don't know how you had said
Well,
that
yeah.
in the
Well, in
end.
general, here you are, legitimately with that Scorpio lineage
Right.
and Venus in Capricorn. both very strong, autonomous, and independent, and the Scorpio part is complete unto yourself, and Capricorn is about being a mover and shaker, and being like the one who takes responsibility, the one who manifests, gets results, and so on. So the majority of Leo types, I won't say all of them, but the majority of Leo types are quite threatened to be with that type of woman.
Yeah.
They're more likely wanting to be with a woman who's just dotes on them.
Yeah, okay, honey.
Or just is there to perform certain things for them, pick up after them.
No, thank you.
So keep the house for them, take care of the kids for them. Yeah.
Even though we have this seeking of having a kind of a harmonious union of female and male energies, sometimes those unions, as we know from our own experiences, right, aren't necessarily even good for us, but there's a yearning for kind of creating the sacred marriage within ourselves.
And then our view would be is that for some it's harder than it is for others, but eventually if you do attain that inner wholeness by marrying your own Mars for a woman or marrying your own Venus for a man, okay, then when relationship is there, or particularly for someone who's not in a relationship, if you've gained that inner wholeness, then when the relationship comes in, it's adding to the wholeness.
I see.
It's not a situation where I can't get on with my life unless I find that person.
Fascinating piece of work. I love how this gets into the origin intentions of the body of work of astrology. Thank you so much. Tell us about how to get to your website if you want a reading.
Yes.
If you want to join the schools and learn this type of astrology.
Yes, it's just it's very simple. It's www.shamanicastrology.com. One long word. Shamanicastrology.com. And if you go to that site, you can just put in your email address and get our free newsletters. You can see the different adventures we do every year, the different trainings we do. I'll be leading another group next year to Scotland and Ireland, which is one of the places where I'd like to take people to get a connection to the old ways.
Fun.
We call the Renaissance of the Sacred Feminine. There's a great deal of emphasis on the Sacred Feminine in our school. Training to become an astrologer.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. I would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.